welcome to the stage, David Barrett, our CEO and co-founder.
Thank you. So, I think we all had some travel experiences to get here, mine as well. I think that I had 4 back-to-back flights which were either canceled or delayed, and then the baggage just disappeared somewhere along there. And so I showed up with no clothes, except for my travel clothes. And so I went to the bodega, and I'm like, I need everything. And so now I'm living the Borgo lifestyle. Yeah, like this. Thank you. So we're all here, and this is amazing. Thank you all for coming. And I think the reason we host these events, we do them only every once in a while when we think the industry is going through a transformation. And I think that's happening right now. And so kind of the goal here is to really talk about kind of the past, the present, and the future of the industry and how we got here, where we think we are right now, and where we think we're going to go. And so maybe kind of one way to view that is we think that there's kind of a tale of 2 business models happening in this industry that's affecting us all. It's kind of crazy when we came into this industry, when I started ExpensiCon, God, like 15 years ago or something like this, we came into this industry with a very different thesis than most others, and that we view the world a bit like this, and that basically there are 300 million businesses in the world, all of which do some form of expense management, because you just can't not. Like, it's synonymous with business. Like, not every business has revenue, all of them have expenses. And so every business in the world does something like this. But if you were to look at the industry of expense management overall, it'd look a bit more like this. It's like a couple businesses in the world. Like, if you were to add up all of the customers of all of our competitors, it would add up to something like 300,000 businesses in the world. That's like, we view it as like maybe 0.1% of the global opportunity has been tapped, which is weird because it's been around forever. And so how is it that the sum of the entire industry has barely made a dent in this entire global opportunity? And we think it comes down to the actual business model itself. We call it the enterprise business model because it kind of only works in the enterprise. You know, it's like if you have a model going after the Fortune 1000, there's only 1,000 of them, and everyone knows who they are. And so basically, everyone else in the industry is using the same business model. And that business model, we think, works a little bit like this. So when we came into this, when we look at the industry overall, it's like this vast, desert, but there's some areas that are much more obvious than others. And so, like, I think most of the industry sees this oasis when they come into it, and their business model is about kind of capturing that oasis, if you will. And so maybe the start is like, the Concurs and so forth, build these, enterprise businesses just designed to soak up this surface level opportunity, if you will. And then others come along after that. We got like, the Tallies and the Abacus. There's like small mini Concurs, but the same basic business model, going after this sort of small, pond of opportunity. But each one is sort of segmenting it off and choosing their own small portion there. And so as a result, if you're switching between companies, you're kind of jumping between these fish tanks, if you will. And they're making this very sort of isolated, sort of compartmentalized experience. Even in an individual sort of company, if you're working with Concur or one of these others, or basically literally any one of our competitors, they're designed around this idea of a top-down acquisition, where basically every company is its own fish tank, and that you can swim and talk with the other people in your company, but try to talk to someone in a different company, it becomes a nightmare. Try to talk to someone in a different tool, it becomes an absolute nightmare. And so as a result, as we kind of see how the industry has evolved, I think it looks something like this right now. It's basically like there's this towering group of these like sort of clunky businesses, each of which does largely the same thing in largely the same way, kind of like, slicing up this opportunity on the surface level, and they just fight over it. And so basically, it's like, if any enterprise business model is going after the same customers that everyone's been going after for like 30 years, and everyone's seeing the same thing, everyone's seeing the same pricing, all this sort of stuff. And so anyway, that's kind of the industry, our glorious manifestation of how we view the traditional expense management industry today. And so our world, when we came into this, is just very, very different. We just went to like a very different part of this desert, where there's nothing there. Like when I started the company, I was like, I'm going to start, I've only worked in small businesses pretty much. And so I wanted to make a startup that's going after small businesses. And everyone's like, there's just nothing there. It's like there's no opportunity. Like, how could you possibly do that? There's no way to acquire any of these companies. And everyone knows that. Everyone knows that sort of thing. But the way that we saw it is, we think that this is a global opportunity. As I said, every business in the world has to do this, and only a tiny fraction use any kind of tool for it. And so we sort of looked into it and said, well, I actually think beneath it all, there is this ocean of opportunity. It's just not on the surface. It's just not obvious how to go after it. And so the very first thing I did when I started Expensify, and it's very unusual. So we had to go back a while, 2007-ish or something like this. The technology was very different. The database technology is very different. And so the very first thing I did was, get these giant servers. Now it sounds like, a weird place to start this. Why are we even talking about the server technology? It doesn't matter. And I'm going to kind of step back and say, we talk about the enterprise business model, which is basically how you have a salesperson go talk to the CEO or the CFO, and then they will sign a contract, they'll provision an instance, and then that instance will add all the employees. It's this very sort of top-down approach. And that top-down approach is nice because it segments customers into very different partition sections, which makes them so much easier to manage. And so most of our enterprise customer or enterprise sort of competitors have a data model which is designed around isolating customers onto their own servers. And in fact, the whole industry works around this. You've ever heard of Amazon Web Services? That's basically, it's built around this idea of scaling out, that you should get a ton of tiny little servers and then split your customers up between these servers. And that's basically how all the technology works. Everyone coming out of college has taught this. DevOps is the whole industry about this, software-defined architecture. There's a whole series of industries based upon this idea and the supremacy of scaling out, of getting a whole bunch of these tiny little fish tanks and putting all your customers between them. We have a very different approach. We scale up with these giant servers. And so our servers are 384 CPU, 6 terabyte of RAM, these giant servers, the biggest servers that you can basically buy that still are less than supercomputer class sort of thing. But no technology is built to run on these. No normal databases are built to run on this kind of thing because there's just too many CPUs. There's just too much going on. And so the first thing that we did after getting these was we built our own database. So we call it Bedrock. And basically it's this technology that is designed to support massively these gigantic servers. And then the challenge with when you have this many servers, this much activity happening on these giant servers is synchronizing them, keeping them, having the same view of the world becomes prohibitively difficult. And so back in 2007 or so, we invented blockchain. Sounds crazy, but actually we are a blockchain business. We've been operating the longest continuously operating blockchain in the world since before Bitcoin's paper was even published. And so blockchain, crypto, super bullshit. Actually, the entire thing is a super scam, whatever. But the technology is super cool, and the technology is great for synchronizing things across the internet at incredibly high volume. Because then we took these servers and we combined them together, if you will. And now as a consequence of all this, and the reason I go into this sort of technology level is that because of our technology, because of the blockchain technology and our giant servers, we have the ability to combine all of our customers onto a single consolidated sort of database. Now, this database is scattered over the world, replicated, and a million other things like this. But the thing that makes it interesting is that any user on the Expensify platform can talk to any other user on the Expensify platform. Our design is much more like a social network than it is an enterprise tool. So we're much more like a LinkedIn than a Salesforce. And that's unique in the industry. Now, we didn't do it because, we thought ahead or knew this industry well. But once we had this technology, we realized it had a number of nice benefits. And so our entire approach towards customer acquisition starts with the individual employee, typically. If you download the Concur app right now, and it'll ask you basically, are you a CEO? And if you just say no, it says bye. It doesn't even try to talk to you. It's crazy. It doesn't even put you on a mailing list. It doesn't do anything at all because they're just useless, whatever. But ours different. With Expensify, you download the app for free without waiting to be asked, without asking permission. And then you just start using it and submitting expenses to your company because we recognize that the opportunity is almost largely untapped in the world. And anyone who wanted expense management, any boss who wanted expense management would have it by now. They would have had it all along. But there's so many companies that don't have anything, and their employees are basically what's driving that. So that's been our business model from the start. And the business model only works because we have this database. If you have this highly partitioned database model, an employee signs up, Like, which server do you put them on? You don't know. Like, if it's Expensify, you can sign up with your Gmail address. You can sign up with your phone number. And it's because everyone goes to the same place. Everyone's swimming in the same pool, if you will. And that's as a consequence of our technology. Now, that's been really great for us. And that's basically like where all of our growth has come from. And it's propelled us to where we are. And so as we kind of build this technology further, so we build our own pond, if you will. And then now, a challenge, however, and especially going back a while, is remember back when there was like a bunch of different mobile platforms? Like, we actually, at the start, supported not just iOS and Android, but BlackBerry, Windows Phone, and my personal favorite, Palm Pre. That's right. There was a minute there where basically Palm Pre was our fastest growing one because there was, in the App Store, there's a whole category for receipts, and we were the only app in it. So that was cool. And so for a while, we didn't know which one's gonna win, if you will. And we were a very small group of developers. And so the very first thing we did for mobile was to develop this platform called YAPL, yet another platform library, which is basically a native application that uses a common sort of business logic layer. And so as a result, and this worked across all these different platforms. So we had cross-platform development across these 5 different platforms. It's just pretty wild. Once we had this great technology infrastructure from the database and the technology infrastructure for cross-platform development, then we started to build, Expensify itself. And we started with, it's like we're moving real money. And so building technology that actually touches real dollar bills is so much scarier and harder than doing something that's just like moving around bits. And so I think that from day one, it was all about PCI compliance, security, money laundering, KYC. All these things are built into our DNA from the earliest days. And that's been a challenging thing because all those are super hard and super boring. But, you got to do them all. Once we had that, then we sort of build our expense management on top of that, of course, and what we've become known for. And sort of grew through the viral dynamic expense management powered by a technology across all these platforms across the world. And then on top of that, we had our system we call Concierge. And so Concierge, as you all know and love, is basically our single virtual identity that's powered by hundreds of people around the world and powered by AI to basically make sure that everyone gets a fast answer within under 2 minutes for basically any question you can imagine. And I would say this is kind of what we looked like, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Like this clean, nice system that just made sense. Everything we did was had a strong technology foundation to it. It was powerful, it was global, and it was basically best in breed. And I think that's where we were a few years ago. And so that was and maybe even the last ExpensiCon, I would say. It's that's kind of, we felt really top of our game and top of the industry. And that's probably the last time we met, if you will, was this. But we were still a small company. Now, I guess we're a public company now and all that sort of stuff. And so by many measures, we're a large company. But I would say by our measure, we're a very, very small company. When we view it as the opportunity size is, hundreds of million businesses, we think that there is an opportunity to link 1 billion people on this planet through a common platform, which sounds wild. No one even talks about that sort of scale, but it happens. If Instagram can link 1 billion people through pictures, we think we can link 1 billion people through money. And because the financial conversations are already happening, we just need them to happen in the same place. And so that's basically the vision that we have is a much, much bigger vision. And so we could have, like most companies, just kind of said, cool, we're done. And just, ride off into the distance and kind of just, ride it and just be that. Whatever we were a few years ago, we could have just stayed that forever. But we decided to take a bigger chance. And so the first thing we did is we dramatically expanded our infrastructure under the hood. So we doubled our servers, made them even bigger. The technology is so much more powerful. And so, but you can't see that. But it's something that it was really hard to do, especially while the application was running on top of it. Then we added a bunch more people to our team. And so one thing is we've actually open sourced our client. And so now we have over 1,000 developers actually contributing to our code. And it's amazing. It's this huge, our full-time engineers that work salaried, it's maybe 40 or so, but then we have 1,000 outside developers working with us as well. And not just the developers, and we scaled up our on the sales side, and the support side, and our accounting side, and things like that. So we dramatically expanded the team, which, as anyone is dealing with change management in the company, that's challenging. There's a lot of work that goes into hiring and all that you don't necessarily see, but is hard work. Then we sort of expanded our ability to really tap into a global footprint. And you may have seen, we worked very hard on this for a long time. Now we can support basically anyone in the world. Like you can withdraw from 24 different countries, you can disperse to about 200 different countries, and so like you don't have every country. Like North Korea has been really tricky up there, but we got almost every country, and so we have a real global capacity now, which is great because again we're going after that 300 million business opportunity. We're going after that billion user opportunity. Then on top of that, we added a whole bunch of new use cases. And basically, you may have seen in the past few years, we rapidly released. It's like we're expense management pure for a long time. And then like back to back, we're like, oh, we also do invoicing and bill pay. And we also do corporate travel. And we also do corporate cards and all this other stuff. Now, that seemed nuts. It's basically like, how did you launch that many distinct products back to back all at the same time? Because to anyone else in the industry, they're like, these are completely different industries, completely different businesses. Everything about them is different. But in our view, actually, they're all the same thing. And we saw it this way the whole time. Every form of payment is kind of a repeat of the same pattern. It's a list of expenses that you give to someone and they pay you in return. And everything else is just details. If you give a list of expenses to your company, we call it an expense report. If you give it to your roommate, it's just called a peer-to-peer money transmission. If you give it to your client, it's an invoice. But it's the same expenses, the same list. So we built a universal payment engine that supports all these different use cases. And we've been building it all along, but it was only the past few years we kind of revealed the power of this engine. And so now we can basically do everything, which is great. And then on top of that, of course, is continuing to expand out Concierge. And it's something else we've announced just recently, and it's not just about, Concierge is not just a support tool. It's also, now we have a dedicated onboarding specialist. So whenever you set up a client, there's someone there that would happily take off all of the burden of setting up that client for you. Likewise, your clients will all have account managers. And so as a result, you have an extension of your own team in our team. And so that took a lot to make this whole thing work at scale and sort of cost effectiveness and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I'd say kind of where we are right now. And I'd say we're still a little under construction, if I'm being honest. And there's a lot going on that's still building out this vision. And so what I'd like to talk more about kind of in the rest of this, and this whole event really, is designed to bring in the best experts while things are still flexible. Like our architecture is still up for grabs. Our designs are still in the works. And so we're here to share what we can, some of which exists, some of which is still in planning, some of which is still in construction, because we want your feedback on that, like what parts are good, what parts are not good, what's missing, and so forth. And so this is intended to be less a pitch and more of a collaboration, and an invitation, if you will, to share your feedback with us, because we need that feedback to build what you want for you. Because we all want the same thing, even if we don't quite know what it is yet. And so that's kind of the purpose of this conversation. So give it, a few more months, maybe early next year, they'll be nice and clean again, just like we were for the last ExpensiCon. Everything's going to be perfect, and we're going to be on the new app, and everything's going to be perfect, but we need to work together to get there, and that's what we want your help with. I mean, and I could talk about this stuff, all day long. I could talk about, how we're definitely taking this whole thing to Mars, but I'm just going to skip over that for now. But I think that's, again, a good intro. Basically, I think one thing that the industry is facing is this concept of future shock. There's basically just so much happening, and it's happening so fast. And I think that we're part of that. I mean, like, we're talking about fucking Mars and things like this. And so, like, yeah, we're part of that future shock. We get it. But we understand that that's part of the transformation of the industry is all of the change that you're forced to deal with. And so when we think that basically change is happening at this super rapid scale, we think that the consequence of that is scaling out your business has just never been harder because the challenges have never been trickier. I mean, just to kind of list a couple of them and to see if these resonate. One is that because there are so many tools, training is super fucking hard because everything is happening. Every one of these platforms is changing all the time, and you're supposed to be like experts in all of them, while also hiring a team, while also there's like a legendarily low sort of like enrollment in schools for this. It's like, you're under every single gun, basically, to scale up under the difficult conditions. And I would say because every one of these is, evolving, not only do you need to train your team, you need to keep them continuously retrained on every one of these teams, and that's a challenge. On top of that, there's so many ways to talk. Like, I mean, there's just, in the past few years, ever since the pandemic, like how many different, like, collaboration and sort of, video conference tools. It's like, it's crazy. There's just so many of them. They're all basically the same, but your clients need you to be on all of them and also on all of them all the time. So it's like, continuously available on every single platform with instant responsiveness. It's basically the baseline expectation, which is super reasonable, right? Yeah, totally, no problem. And then, of course, on top of all of this, despite all of this change, despite every part of the technology platform changing, you're expected to execute highly repeatable, perfect processes with no mistakes. So train, onboard, scale, collaborate, be available, and also do it all perfectly with no mistakes, and perfectly build. Like, that's kind of like what we imagine the challenge that you're facing right now. And we think that's happening in the entire industry. And it's, some component of this has always been true, but it's never been more true than now. And it's only going to get more and more true. Like, this future shock is not cresting, it's still accelerating. And that's a scary thing for everyone. So when we think about, and billing, yeah, that one too, I should have said. And so as a consequence, like, the way we kind of view the industry is you're almost kind of caught in the crossfire of this battle for like platform supremacy. And we're a part of that. Like, we're shooting our guns just as much as anyone else. And so as a result, we recognize that puts you all in a very, very dicey position. Because we think the nature of fragmentation makes your jobs so much harder than they need to be, for a variety of reasons. One is that in general, accountants are just super expensive. Like, these are very high-paid professionals with extreme training, and there are just fewer and fewer of them available. Way more people are retiring that are coming into the industry, and that's just a scary proposition overall. They need to be trained up front and continuously retrained. They need to be accommodated for the fact that, like, they need to redo their work. So yes, they're super expensive to do the first time. What's that great phrase? It's like, there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. Like, I think that's one thing we all grapple with. It's like, you just need to make it happen, and it sucks. And then likewise, it's super fucking stressful. Like, I mean, I think the industry, one reason people are leaving it so quickly is because it's really intense. Like, the compliance requirements are extreme. The training is hard. The hours are long. And it's a hard industry to be in on the best of times. And these are certainly not the best of times. Likewise, clients kind of cheap. They're just not going to pay for things that are obviously wasteful. Like, basically, it's like everyone, I think one challenge we've seen is that everyone hates getting on the phone, and yet everyone's always on the phone. It's like, oh God, I sent you an email, I texted you, you talked to the client, you're just begging them to respond to you. Like, I need to close your books, but I need these answers, and no one responds. And so the only reliable strategy is, like, I put something in your calendar, we're going to sit down, this horrible 2-hour call, we're going to go through this Excel list of basically this giant list of tasks. And so it's like, and everyone's like, fuck, this is the worst. And it's like, yeah, but it would have been better had you responded to any of my emails or anything else, but this is it. And then they blame you for it, and everyone hates it, and they're like, I don't want to pay for this damn call. And it's like, I don't even do it. Everyone's unhappy. Next, obviously, they're just like, just mistakes are inevitable, especially under the chaos of this industry, but there's not going to pay for it. Like, how much time do you write off because of these mistakes? This come from miscommunication and stress and training and all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, billing is like super not easy, because time that you fail to track is not time that you can bill. And then time is billed wrong, just has to be clawed back. And so it's just, every part of this is just complicated, and more complicated because of this platform fragmentation. And so everyone's, ultimately, the solution to this is some kind of platform consolidation. Like, we're not alone in this. Everyone's aiming for the same vision, if you will. And I think it's a vision that I think we all want to get to. The question is basically, which platforms survive, if you will. And everyone has a different approach towards it. I think that, this kind of all-in-one vision, you talk to every single player, and they're pitching some version of that. And so the question is, okay, well, who's going to win that battle? And how would you win? You kind of go forward to who's going to win that platform. It's going to be whoever has the most consolidated and seamless vision. How it's going to all work together the best, that's who's going to win that future. And we think that we can be that player because we've been working on it longer than anyone. From the day one, we viewed the idea of expense management, invoicing, bill pay, all these things are the same thing. And so we can unite them into a common platform. And by doing that, I think we have a number of good benefits. There we go. Thank you. So one, I think that we can just reduce the cost of sort of managing your team on this, because if you have good technology, you can start to compete better when you're hiring these teams. And you can onboard them to sort of a common, simple stack for everything. Likewise, you can eliminate training by basically having the same tool to do all these different things simultaneously. Just reduces that on upfront training and the retraining necessary. Additionally, because of the sort of hybrid nature of working with your own team and our team, we can actually take so much more work off your plate if you let us. But you have to collaborate with us to let it happen in the first place. And likewise, because training is not just about the tool, it's all about your unique processes as well. If you can bring your own training into the tool such that it's a self-documenting thing. So a new accountant comes in and there's already the best practices of how to work with each client, either firm-wide best practices or unique to each client, that can reduce it as well. So we're trying to, on one hand, just reduce the cost of everything, because we know that the costs have spiked in recent years for all of this, and we want to reduce the cost to, not just for us, but for your firm, for how do you have fewer people doing more? That's where the real cost to your organization come from. Likewise, we just want to de-stress everything by basically ensuring that the conversations are happening in the context of where they're needed. It's not like you need to switch to Slack or something like this. I mean, I'm sure you've all been invited to 700 Slack workspaces or something like that. And they're so weird because it's you got a separate sign-in with the same email address with a different password or whatever it is. It's just such a janky experience. And then likewise, once you're there, you're just in this giant room. It's we're in the accounting room for this 500 persons. Here we talk about accounting, all accounting apparently, and so it's just a chaos of just this cacophony of conversations that just never ends. And so it's just this very confusing and stressful experience. Well, I think probably most of you just say no to Slack. They're nope, it just does not work for my firm. It's not going to use it. And so I get that. I think that this idea of unstructured chat is just not good for your billing model, for your collaboration, and so forth. So that's one. Is we think that we can actually reduce the cost of your entire team by accomplishing a few of these things. Plus, we think that we can increase the value of your clients to you and your value to them. One is that the more you actually have integrated, the more you have people on the same platform, the more we can track the time spent in that platform and give you a report of basically where your people spend that time. So I don't know what billing system you use. I bet it's garbage. And furthermore, I bet it's always wrong. Because probably it's we tell our clients we bill in 6 minute increments, perfect reliability. Reality is at the end of the week, someone's how much do you work? You're I don't know, 20 hours maybe. And then you just kind of hope for the best. And if they're that wasn't 20 hours, you're how's 15 sound? And that's basically what billing is. We could actually just tell you. It's no, you spent this much time on each one of your clients because this is the time you spend in tool. And the more that you spend in the same tool, the more accurate that report will be, and the better your billing is going to be with less work. Second is that we can sort of capture rev share. Now, different companies have different views on this. But one area that we can capture rev share that doesn't come out of the client's pocket is interchange. Basically, if you use the ExpensiCon card, we can basically give back revenue from the card to you. So you can monetize your clients more or not, up to you. And then last is about allowing you to do more than you historically been able to do. Because I think that probably most of you are trying to go beyond just pure bookkeeping, accounting services. You're trying to get into high-end advisory services, but also just do more across the board. Whether it's compliance work, whether it's just higher value work that's more differentiated and more likely to be protected from ChatGPT, which is coming at our heels from everyone. And so I think that basically we're here not just to increase the value of you to your clients, but increase the value of your clients to you. So the way that we do that is, and as I mentioned, we view every single payment as a conversation between two or more people. And just like you can't sort of, pay yourself, you can't talk to yourself. It's it's the nature of payments is an inherently collaborative thing. And I think it's interesting, if you weren't going to use a payment tool, your payment would probably start looking something like this. It would have to start off with you going to talk to someone. It's just hey, buddy, give me $50. That's what it starts with. And so every conversation around payments is actually a conversation between two more people. And so if we just start with the design of New Expensify, which is a very creative name, I think I'll take credit for that one, is around this idea that payments and collaboration are the same thing, that they're all conversations. But they're a different kind of conversation. Payments conversations are highly contextualized. They're very structured conversations where you're talking about specific things that have an end. It's not like the accounting Slack room where basically it's just this endless thing that goes on until the business fails. I guess that's an end of kinds. But rather it's about structuring things around a particular close, around a particular payment, expense report, and things like this. And now Expensify has always had some form of report commenting and so forth. It's been very popular. We've kind of doubled down on that to really extract out and review the entire product from a conversation-first perspective. And so anyway, new Expensify just feels like a chat tool. It's basically like WhatsApp and Venmo had a love child. It's basically what the new Expensify is. And so it starts with, you can just talk. You can just talk to people on Expensify. And it's a very robust chat system as well. It's like it basically has everything that you would expect, like in Slack. You can react to messages and so forth. You can thread messages and talk. So you can basically get as deep as you want with Slack-style conversations, but with all the pain-in-the-ass aspects of Slack. Because recall, our technology works with anyone in the world. And so you can use our tool with anyone who has an email address or a phone number. You don't have to create an account. You don't have to talk with IT. There's none of that. You just basically open a chat, type in their email address, and then we will begin emailing them, and then everything you say will be emailed to them. And they can just respond via email. They don't even have to use the tool, but you can. It's a tool that you can adopt by yourself, whether or not your clients do. And so this is something that's basically a collaboration and communication tool that cuts across all IT barriers because of the technology foundation I talked about before. It's the easiest to use chat tool for this reason. Anyway, so chat's a big deal, and it's infused to everything we do. But chat's not everything. Like basically, it's a financial transaction conversation. Now, you could just say, give me $50 and settle it offhand. Or you can say, I just want to request money from you in the tool. Now, an interesting thing in the new Expensify, the word expense report or invoice or bill doesn't exist. Because to a client, they don't think in those accounting terms. They just think, I want money. It's like, just pay up is basically their mentality. And so say, okay, if you request money from someone, then it's in tool. And then likewise, the benefit of requesting money in tool is now you can pay it in tool as well. Basically, on the other side of that conversation, they can click a pay button and it's paid. And it works the same no matter where you are, whether it's across different countries now and so forth. It's basically a very universal, simplified payments conversation. Likewise, it's not just money. You can say, okay, I can scan a receipt and send it to my roommate. It's like, how much did actually those groceries really cost? Well, you can just use it that way as well. You can import your card and use that and say, well, here's the transaction for the purchases. And it works in this very personal context. And so again, it's conversational. You can react to it. You can thread and all this sort of stuff. Do whatever you want to do and have those conversations sort of in context, if you will. But it's not just obviously a consumer payments tool. It's obviously a business payments tool as well. And so the nature of using an expense report is the same exact thing. The only difference is who you request it from. If you request money from your roommate, we know that it's a personal payments flow, and so that we can handle it accordingly. If you request money from your company, we know it's an expense report. And so we just, to the individual, it's the same. It's the same $50 to them. It's the same receipt to them. But we know it has a different accounting experience to you. And so when you receive basically a payments request to a company, we'll treat it in that special way. Likewise, if you need to do additional coding and so forth, it's like, actually, this is a travel meal, things like this. That coding can be brought in. All of the power and sophistication that Expensify has always had is still there. And it can be revealed as necessary to the clients that need it, only when and where they need it. And so we're trying to keep that simplified common experience across everyone without losing any of the power as you scale into the more advanced use cases. Likewise, you can continue tagging expenses and things like this. The same thing same functionality you've always seen, but just brought in a more sort of conversation-first way. Now, likewise, as I said, if you want to get paid by clients, it's also integrated invoicing. And so same exact thing. I had to highlight the changes from slide to slide because they're so easy to miss, which is interesting. I think one challenge we had with this design is it just feels too easy. It's basically like, there's got to be more to this. It's just, like, why is every other tool so wildly different? Like when you're in Bill.com and you want to send an invoice versus pay an invoice, wildly different experiences. Entirely different products, almost, and it's told you and supported by different teams. Everything about them is different. But here it's just like, oh, it's just fucking the same thing. It's like, that's weird. I must be missing something. But I don't think you are missing anything. And I think the reason that the platforms are as fragmented as they've been is not because it was ever anything that served you. It's not because there's any actual underlying financial or accounting reason for them to be different. It's because the sales model required them to be different. Because everyone else basically, again, they have this very traditional top-down sales model where there's someone with a commission calling to a business owner, and they have a very tight pitch. It's basically like, you can't pitch everything. You have to pick something. Like, okay, you sell invoicing. And then once you sell invoicing, then you have marketing materials to support that. Salespeople, commission structures. Well, then you have to, did you buy invoicing by itself? A whole business model around it. And that there's teams that go into this, technology and servers underneath it. And then when you want to basically start talking about bill processing, which is the exact same thing as invoicing, just from the other side, it's a whole different team. It's a whole different experience. And so all the fragmentation that we have in the industry is not serving anyone except for the sales teams of those competitors, because that's what's necessary for them to run their own businesses, but it's not necessary for you to run your business. It's not helping you in any way. And so our design is to strip that out, bring everything onto a common platform, and expose the inherent similarity between these flows, because by doing that, if you remember, there's only one way to request money. You just say request money. And then it works in every single context, just reducing the training requirements for all of this. Now, additionally, and this is a wild one as well, a paycheck is just a money request that happens twice a month. It's the same as anything else. It doesn't have to be a wildly different tool, different experience. It's paid from the same bank account, connected to the same accounting system. It's the same thing, and with some tax junk on top of it. But don't worry about that. And so every part of this, everything from just chatting with your buddies, settling up for drinks with your roommates, requesting money for an expense report, requesting money from your clients as an invoice, paying money or paying bills, managing payroll, all of this is the same exact flow again and again. And so that's pretty cool. We're excited by that because we think that we can bring such a radical degree of simplicity to this industry that no one else is even trying. Because again, everyone else out there is they carved off their section of the pond, and they're basically just spewing their sales teams into it or whatever it is. And so, but they're not going after the global opportunity, and so they don't need radical simplification because they're going after a customer that's accustomed to that high complexity, that fragmented environment. We're going after everyone, and so we need to be much more simple than everyone else because that's critical to our business model. Now, what's also nice about this is one thing we realize is, so we have a zillion, accountants that work with ExpensiCon, but we talk about the CAS practice. Basically, this just a subset of the organization that talks to, that manages expenses, if you will. And it's typically it depends on the firm. It's often a small part of the company. And so not even relevant to most of the firm and most of the conversations. Because it's like, if you think in a particular day, how often do you do expense reports? Really? It's often, but it's not daily. It's not 10 times a day. It's not 100 times a day. But you do talk, collaborate 100 times a day with a lot of other people about other stuff. Even if you're talking to clients, most of your client conversation isn't about expense reports. It's not even strictly about finance. It's just about a bunch of stuff. And it's like, can you just do that thing for me? Can you answer this question, whatever it might be? And it's so hard. And so as a result, we think the way that we can offer more value to you is helping you manage the real problems, which aren't just expense reports. They do boil down to that at the end, but there's so much that happens before that. And so I want to talk about basically what I think is the most interesting and radical and disruptive part of this platform. It's not even the money part. It's just the simple idea of task management. Now, that sounds pretty vague. And so I want to talk about basically how this platform helps you try to automate your entire experience with your clients using what we call our guides and our tasks. Now, this is what the experience looks like on the desktop, if you will. Again, same exact thing that you've always seen in a million other tools. Basically, it's like you got on the left-hand nav here, a list of people you're talking to, and the right, there's a big chat experience. That's kind of how it works. When you sign up for ExpensiCon, this is what it looks like, on the desktop, if you will. If you want to onboard a new client, it's like, you go to that big button on the left and say, I want to create a new workspace, if you will. And so one of the challenges and dicey things here is we're switching a lot of language around. And if we sort of step back to ExpensiCon, old ExpensiCon, or no, ExpensiCon Classic, because I think what we need to call it, because it's more refined. It was built almost like a prototype. And I know that we're a public company and all this revenue and things like this, but we view ourselves as kind of a pre-revenue startup because we think the opportunity is so much bigger. We've barely even begun to tap it, and so everything we've done to date was a prototype to learn how to do it. And because in engineering terms, if you've never done something before and you want to learn how, the best way to do it is you just do it, and then you throw it out and then do it again. And so this is called plan to throw one away. And that's kind of the attitude that I think at the very least I've brought to Expensify is that everything we've done to date, it's great, but it's not nearly as great as it could be. And so we're in the process of trying to migrate to this new vision, which is a dicey proposition that we need your help with. We need your help to build this vision and then get everyone on board with it. But it's a radically simpler and better vision. And so that's the challenge that we have for us. And this vision basically it's a simplified language. Like in the past, in classic Expensify, we call it an expense policy, which makes sense. But it's also highly constrained. This idea of a policy, it's very jargony and things like this. We're trying to strip all the jargon out. And so in new Expensify, it's just a workspace. It's a place you work, a space for work, simple enough. So you create a new workspace for a client, and then we're going to say, great, actually for this, Alice, the accountant or whatever, is like you can set up all this stuff for this workspace. That's wonderful. And so you can set it all up. But the more interesting is that every new workspace has what's called a set of specialists assigned to them from the first moments. It's basically like, hi, I work for you now. Basically, you create a workspace, you just get a new employee. An employee will do whatever you want for that client. And so it's like, do you want them to, maybe connect them, invite all the employees, set up the reporting structure, figure out what that is, talk to the client to figure out how to connect their bank accounts and gather all their information. We'll do that. We'll do all of that for you at no additional cost. It's just one of the features of the product is that it should set itself up. And so if you are talking to your clients about how to set up Expensify, you're kind of doing it wrong, because we should be talking to your clients about how to set up Expensify, and you just stand back and let us do the work. We'll do as much or as little as you tell us to, but you need to ask us to do it and let us do it. And so that's what we want to do for you. Now, additionally, you might recall, when someone submits an expense report, it's just a money request. And so it'll appear in the chat, just like we see here in the upper left. It's basically, and you can see that little green dot. Now, in a big design feature of new Expensify is what we call the green brick road. Whenever you see something green, you should probably click it, because it's going to take you where you need to go and do the thing that you need to do. And so if you go and click on that, that chat there, you're going to see essentially this is what in expense report, or rather, every employee has what's called a workspace chat, where you can talk. It's a conversation between the company and the employee. And all of the workspace admins are in this chat automatically. And so basically, you start with a conversation between every employee and the group of admins around this. And you can talk, again, it's this full Slack-style conversation, but it's created on a per employee basis between the management or the accounting team of that company and each employee. And then you can see basically an expense report here. It's basically like, oh yeah, David's submitting a couple expenses for $75. And so from there, and for a lot of companies, especially a high trust company, they just click pay. It's like, I know who you are. I know who that client is. Those receipts kind of check out or whatever. I don't actually care that much. I'm just going to pay it. And so that's fine. We're not going to force you to engage more than you need to, because for a huge range in the market, every tool out there is such overkill. It is basically so much more powerful than they need. And so we don't want to force anyone to be more powerful than it needs to be. If you do want more detail, however, that's fine. Just click into the report, and now you can see basically a chat for the report itself. And it has things like, for example, an audit trail for each report. You can see all of the history, what's happened with that report. But you can see it all in context and talk back and forth with not just all the administrators of the report, but also the individual employee and so forth. Ask questions and things like this. And it all gets reactions and threads and all the same stuff that you'd expect from a modern chat solution. But if you want to, Inception style, go deeper and say, actually, I want to know more about this specific expense. Well, that's cool too. Every single expense has a chat. Again, you're getting the theme here. Everything is chattable, and everything has the full capabilities of this. And it's not just basically a chat, but you can also see the change history for each expense. It's like, this employee tagged it in a certain way, and you have a conversation with that employee on this tool, and in a way that basically is going to drive attention to it, so you don't have to set up that stupid Zoom call or whatever it is, and say, can you please talk about this particular, is that the right client? And be like, oops, I fucked up, I'll fix it. And you can basically fix everything in context and have these conversations in context on a common tool that tracks all your time around it. And this tool is also, you can think of it as an auditable trail that has secure document storage as well. Basically, if you want to upload information to it, we'll capture the information and store it forever as well. And none of it it's tamper-proof. Basically, if you edit it, we can still see the edits, retain everything. Nothing can be deleted forever. We can get you access to any information you need. And so basically, every part of this is an auditable paper trail for every aspect of the business, seamlessly combined down into the payment solution itself. So that's one. But I would say, likewise, and I think this is probably the thing I like the most help with in this conversation, and the thing that excites me the most, is just the idea of assigning tasks to clients. Now, I imagine a lot of you have practice management tools, and most of them are focused on helping you manage your practice, basically assign a task to one of your individual employees, and then basically manage things this way. But assigning a task to a client is just kind of wild. There's really very little out there that does that. And so as a result, we want to say, no, when you're onboarding a client, or at any point in time, if you need them to do anything, just create a task and assign it to them. And then we will have the structured, nice chat, perfect, auditable, tamper-proof, with integrated document storage. And so basically you have a complete record of all your historical artifacts with each customer, basically built into the tool itself. Again, no additional costs, it's all built in. So you don't need like a bunch of different tools to do it. Like we can just all do it in the tool itself. And on top of that, I would say this idea of, so in your, let's say, in your admins room, because every workspace just has a room called admins, which is all the workspace admins in this room. And you have like a list of tasks, and you can keep track where they are, assign them out, and so forth. And then at the top, in any sort of room that has a list of tasks, we're going to say, okay, well, here's where you are in those tasks. Here's like, what's finished, what's not finished, and so forth. And so you're always at any point in time, you're aware of where you are in the thing that you're trying to do. And this is the difference between unstructured Slack-style chat, which is basically like, we're just going to shoot the shit forever kind of thing. Whereas highly transactional chat is, I need to do something specific, and I need to know, everyone needs to know what their part is in that and if it's done or not. They're like, and we need to close the books, and here's specifically who's holding up the train, things like this. And so if you can say, okay, we're going to pull up a list of basically all these different tasks, the outstanding tasks in this company, if you will, which is a mix of tasks assigned to you, tasks assigned to the client, and also like, I don't know, outstanding expense reports or like bills or whatever it might be, all pulled into a single place so you can see what has to happen to close the books for a particular client. But I'd say the most interesting thing is trying to view this on autopilot, this idea of most of these tasks aren't one-time tasks. There's things that you have to do again and again for each client, for each month, and so forth. And so the dream is that once you set up these tasks for a particular company, then you can set them on a recurring basis. Just think of like, a Google Calendar and how you can set up a recurring invite. Same deal, except on a task basis. And you say, actually, all this stuff, all these monthly close tasks, they have to happen every single month. And so we're not going to wait for someone to kick off the close. Like, we'll kick off the close for you because we know exactly what it is. It's the same thing. Same people need to do the same thing. And so let's just capture all of that into the tool itself. And each of these tasks has their own self-documentation for them. So it's about capturing a firm's best practices in the tool so that when a new accountant is assigned to a client, they don't just come in cold and be like, who the fuck is this? Because basically they come into a client and say, oh, okay, actually I see a complete history of all the previous closes. I see all the conversations back and forth. I can figure that out. I can also see that these are the tasks that have to happen on a monthly basis. They're all documented for exactly what needs to happen right there. I can see historical instances of them happening, and I know exactly who they're assigned to. In fact, I didn't even know who these people are. The tool already assigned them out to the right people, and I just had to just sort of like monitor it. That's our vision for how we think that we can build a better tool that basically is helping you tell us to automate, or either with the technology or with our onboarding specialists or account managers, so that we do all the grunt work for you so that you can focus on the high value work for your firm. That's what we think the future is going to be. And we think that future is going to be a highly integrated one across all these different tools, all these different use cases, and strip away all the artificial fragmentation of this industry, because we think it doesn't serve anyone. You don't like it, we don't like it, clients don't like it, nobody likes it. And then maybe sort of one final bit here is when we get everyone onto a common platform, then we can give you much more powerful reporting about their behavior. And so we can say, okay, well, for all of your accountants, here's the clients they had, here's how much time was spent in tool for clients. And now we can get as detailed as you want. Again, this is a conversation. This is not explaining what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. This is just an introduction to get your feedback on what you would like. Do you want just a number of hours in tool for each client? Do you want to know exactly how much time was spent on each expense report in every single chat? We can do that. We have all this data. We can slice and dice it however you want. And so we could also talk about doing historical tracking around, this is how long it typically takes to process something. And here's for this particular accountant, here's their outliers. It takes them twice as long, or they're twice as fast, or whatever it might be. And so we can give you powerful reporting because we're tracking this data internally, but we need to know what you want, what's going to help you make your firm more profitable. Likewise, we can say, great, we see all of the spend across the entire organization, and we can see how much of it was moved onto the card. And then based upon that, we can say, well, here's your rev share. We're going to say, and maybe this is actually an announcement. I'm not sure. Maybe you know this, maybe not. But going forward, we're going to be offering a 0.5% rev share on every transaction through the ExpensiCon card. And so if you just want to make money off of your clients by getting them onto a card, look, you can just give that interchange to Chase. That works too. Or give it to you, and that works too. And so basically, we're trying to partner with you to around not just the best experience, but the best economics around these clients, because we all have to succeed together on a per client basis. And I think that might be all I have. So what we're going to do next here is we're going to bring up Joe. Joe, can we give him some chairs out here? Anyone? Anyone listening? Yeah, there's Joe over there. And that's the man right here. We got some chairs. And that's all we got. We're going to talk to Joe for a bit.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. So everyone knows Joe. Joe probably knows everyone here as well. And so what I thought we'd do here is just kind of react. I'd like to your reaction to what you just saw, because you haven't seen any of this before.
Right.
And so I think that in particular, what I'd like to hear is what part of this resonates, what part doesn't, what part sounds cool, what part sounds lame. Let's go from there.
Yeah. All right. So the part that resonated was this fusion of task management and the way we communicate with clients. I think that's brilliant. I think that is the future. I said the same thing at the Accounting Today show. They wanted me to project the future of CAS. And I talked about this fusion of client collaboration and task management. Also, the fusion of client collaboration and general ledger, which you didn't drill down on, but it's there by implication. You already talked to the accounting platforms. Now you're going to have a conversational level expense report. So the implication is, well, we already have the connectors. Let's just go ahead and drop all of this also into the GL. Is that implication or is that reality?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, again, so all the extreme bidirectional synchronization that Expensify already has is still there under the hood.
Right.
So when you say conversation around the GL itself, can you elaborate?
Well, you basically were saying that the transaction's a conversation, and I agree with you. Like every check's a conversation, every expense is a conversation, but you could also say every receibrable, every transaction is a conversation. So what kept occurring to me over there, and I actually wrote this down because I was trying to brainstorm a little bit, is you have a branding challenge / opportunity here, David, because you're no longer Expensify. You are Transactify, right? You're
trademark that.
Yeah, no, seriously, or Accountify or something. But I didn't even want. I thought, well, Accountify. I mean, these may already be taken, but the point I'm trying to make is you've now transcended the expense report with everything that you're doing, and what you're really doing is you're managing the economies of relationships.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And the other thing I wrote down, because I was taking notes frantically over there, is when you were talking about kind of bottom up. What I kept thinking to myself is the ultimate bottom up is not the employee of a company. The ultimate bottom up is the person running a home office, running their personal finances. So if you could connect the whole world between the personal finance, I mean, that's really basically what Scott Cook did, right? He started with Quicken and worked his way to the business, not because he went there, because he was dragged there. The business has dragged him from Quicken into Quicken for Business into QuickBooks, right? And then it sort of came full circle and they divested Quicken, but there's Mint, right? So the point is, if you serve the whole individual economically, I had this little injury thing. They call it a sports injury, but
injury?
Yeah. Well, I did go to the hospital for 3 days, but they call it a sports injury, but you have to believe paintball's a sport, right? And then you have to believe that paintball in the metaverse is a sport. And if you can get over those two, but you still have to pick stuff up off the physical ground. Anyway, so I went to the hospital for 3 days and this stuff, but my wife, she runs all the finances for the home, and I'm so grateful for that. She actually has an accounting degree. I don't. My degree's in classical Greek. That's another story. But the point is, she runs all the home finances, and it's been so stressful to her just dealing with all of the medical bills and all of the expenses related to this, on top of managing the company, the household credit cards, on top of their stock portfolios, and all of these I know are finances beyond expenses. But if we could tame the beast at every level, then how many of these individuals would bring the goodness of their home office to the business all the way up to the CEO?
Yeah, actually, I agree with that. And I think that, I didn't really touch on that, but it's interesting you bring it up. I think that this idea of, if we want to link 1 billion people onto a common platform, it has to be around an action that you do on a daily basis. And business expenses, even business like finance, is not enough.
Yeah.
And especially if you want to connect people between businesses and so forth. And so I'd say the way that, like I mentioned, ExpensiCon's design is closer to a social network than not like a Salesforce or something like this. And I think that you might be like, I hesitate to say that because people are like, a social network, really? Like, does the world need another social network? And I think it needs exactly one more. Because I think that if you look at every social network out there, they're just designed just to waste your time. Like, and basically, and each social network has its own kind of its own angle, if you will. Like, Facebook's for conspiracy theories, and like, Twitter's for just like sheer rumor mongering. Let's say like Instagram's for food porn, Snap's for real porn, and then TikTok is for I don't even know.
And LinkedIn is to sell business people their business.
Yeah, their own. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And so, but
Commercialize.
none of them is trying to actually accomplish anything in this real world, because the real world's hard. If you want to change the real world, someone's got to spend some money, typically. And those platforms aren't really designed for that. You go into Facebook, you hang out for a couple hours, you feel worse about yourself, you leave, and they're like, cool, like, a good transaction. And so I think that our design is a social network for people who want to get shit done. And I think the most obvious shit to get done is in a business, because you have a defined purpose. Everyone's trying to do this business together. But this idea of collaboration around, accomplishing things in the real world goes much further than that. Like, I'd say maybe stepping out. So for example, churches and nonprofits are a big segment for us because they've got a ton of money and complicated tax status, but also most reimbursements don't go to employees, they go to volunteers, people who don't actually have an email address, or maybe it's a phone number, whatever it is, on the business itself. And so, yes, getting shit done inside of a business makes sense, and that's obvious. But then there's like this sort of nonprofit sector, which they're still accomplishing things in the real world, but they're not doing it for a profit motive, and so that's complicated. Then you go kind of further beyond that, and there's just a whole bunch of just random weird stuff, like you're managing your kids' sort of like soccer league or something like that. There's actually a ton of conversations and financial decisions that come out of that are just really hard to manage. Like, I'll give an example. In my neighborhood, so I finally a homeowner after all this time, moved to Portland. Best place ever. Love Portland. Portland, Oregon, by the way, which everyone would agree is the best Portland. And I'm in this nice neighborhood, and so there's a bunch of kids around. And so we host a block party every summer, and it's a fucking nightmare to set up. It's just so much, it's so hard that like I'm probably not gonna do it this summer, because like no one's gotten around to it, sort of thing. And because there's a bunch of decisions and bill splitting and financial things like this, it is a complex sort of a real-world collaboration. It has nothing to do with business, though. And so I think that, long story short, I completely agree. To have a platform that can scale to where we want to go, you have to support these use cases wherever they appear. And yes, they appear the most obviously in businesses, but they happen throughout your entire life. And I think managing medical bills is a great example of this highly structured bill processing environment that's on a consumer basis.
Yes. And it's about taking artificial intelligence, taking the tasks like you mentioned, and breaking it all down into workflows, whether it is at that home office or at the office level. The biggest challenge I'm seeing that accounting firms are facing in CAS, and I'm a CAS guy, and that acronym just means client accounting or advisory services. It's bookkeeping plus so much more, right? So in all of this record keeping that these people have to do, these firms have to do, the biggest challenge they're telling me they face is not technological disruption. They feel like they've been navigating that for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Artificial intelligence is an acceleration point, but they still are going into it confidently. What they're telling me, David, is the standardization is unmanageable. So I'm a metaphor guy. So I thought, well, after hearing this over and over again at the Accounting Today show, BDO Alliance show, what's the metaphor for this? And it would be like writing War and Peace. So you're saying to an accounting firm, go write War and Peace, and then every day of your life, rewrite it. Every single time, every single setting in the book has one slight change. If a storefront paints their storefront, rewrite it, right? Somebody lays different brick, you got to rewrite that area. So you're constantly, perpetually updating War and Peace. After, of course, you've taken the challenge of writing it to begin with, which is why none of these firms actually accomplish it, or very few do, at any kind of scale. And those that do accomplish it end up getting bought, they're acquired by the top 20, because the top 20 solves it through acquisition, like Aprio did, and like so many others do. So what the most exciting thing I saw from your presentation is how the tasks are automatically created from the transactions out. What I would love to see is that workflow, and this may already be in your product plan, thickened up over time so it's not just a task list. It's a true workflow solutions, collaborative, shareable, aggregated into both CAS and tax, and ultimately rolling up into practice management. Now, I don't know if that long range is your vision, but or if at some point you're going to connect into a larger ship, and connect on, because it's either integration, it's either build or integrate, right? But if you could integrate into, it gets stuck in my throat, CCH. But if you can integrate, because they own the top 100, right? But that's the reason I use them as an example. And if you're from Wolters Kluwer here, I apologize. But if you could integrate into maybe some of these more innovative platforms like Canopy that are reinventing practice management, then you can reach a wider audience faster, but maybe also create a lot of, you solve this disparity problem without having to build everything.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And so maybe, first point on that, I don't think, we're not trying to replace practice management. I think they do a lot more than we are aiming to do, but I think that we can bridge practice management to the client. And I think that's how we're trying to approach it from an integration perspective. One challenge for a lot of these, when we looked into them, there's not a lot of good APIs there. But yes, I think that figuring out that bridge is very important. I agree with there.
Just buy them.
Yep. That's one of
seriously, you just buy a market leader. You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
it's easy, right?
Yeah, okay. I'll get my guys on that. And so yes, so I think that integrating the practice management is one. I do think we want to operate without it. So we want to stand alone without practice management, but I think that we can collaborate with them when they're in place. That's one. On the nation of sort of tasks versus workflow. So briefly, I didn't get into this, but the way tasks, because everything in ExpensiCon is basically a chat room. Any chat room can have tasks added to it. Because tasks are rooms, that means that every task can have subtasks and so forth. And so you can really think of our kind of the hierarchy of tasks as like a Gantt chart. And so we're going to be basically allowing in any task or any expense report or whatever it is. Because you could be on an expense report and assign someone a task and like, I can't finish this expense report until these 5 things are done. And it's just basically built into it. And so then we can actually see for your entire organization a complete Gantt chart of here's everything that needs to be done. Here's who needs to do it, and here's the dependency of those sort of operations. Yeah, so we have that data, we're trying to express it in a way. We don't want to overwhelm the user for this, so we're trying to figure out how to communicate this effectively, but yes, that data certainly exists. So that's kind of, and all of it can be recurring in the sense that maybe you have this whole full hierarchy of tasks that's like, some 5 high-level tasks, and each one of these has like 10 mid-level ones, each one that has 20, so it's like 1,000 different tasks that have to happen on like an annual close or something like this. And then you can just repeat that entire hierarchy, basically, on a recurring basis. That's kind of our approach towards task management. But you said you'd like to see more workflow. What would you say is the gap between there?
Yeah, so, it all has to do with how the tasks, the individual cycles, roll up into the larger whole by client, which rolls up into the larger whole by portfolio, which is managed by teams, which then rolls up into the entire of the client base, right? Yeah. So it's about layers. Layers not just of task subligation, but of complexity. So it's a little more than semantics, but it's about broadening out the cyclical workflow into something that's practice-wide. But it's of the same nature.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk advisory a little bit, because that was the other thing that was spinning in my head as you were talking. Is you're creating a treasure trove of information, which is not just financial. This check went to this person. it is relational. Here's the conversation about this check and its nuance, including perhaps questions about what is this? Why does this exist? Why is this check more than it was last month? Why do I keep writing checks to this person? I don't even know who this is, could be one of the chats, right? Well, when you can start dissecting all the subjective elements of that conversation, the relationship pieces and the contextualization, that's a word that you didn't use specifically, but we went all around it. When you can contextualize the financial transaction and make it about a conversation, which is a word you did use, then you can mine that with artificial intelligence and tell me what I need to tell my client in a monthly conversation.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Which means you can empower me to advise.
Well, ChatGPT is all the rage these days. It's exciting to be, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of singularity. It's a great concept where basically once we invent an AI that invents the next AI, then we lose control of everything because it's like you don't understand it. I think we're getting real close to that. It's pretty exciting to be part of the singularity on our watch. But I think that until that happens, while we're still vaguely in control, I think that, because all this conversation is brought into a common platform, it's brought into a place that can be analyzed with this. And I think that you're right. There's probably some good nuance that can be pulled out of that. That it's like, even if you think about like tagging transactions and so forth, right now you have to basically, you have a long conversation around like, who is this for and so forth. And then someone has to go into the GL, create the vendor and all their junk. If we could just basically have a conversation where it's, they just respond, it's like, oh, it's for this particular client. And then concierge, it's like, oh, do you want me to go ahead and create a vendor and also tag all the expenses for it and also fix all the historical stuff? I think that's where it goes because we bring this sort of, once you bring everything into a common platform, it enables those sorts of opportunities.
Even a step farther than that. So whenever concierge sees that you've got payments going out to Zoom and you have payments going out to Microsoft 365 Enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Concierge could say, you're double spending here.
Yeah.
You can consolidate these platforms. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think we've got some time for questions. If we can grab like a microphone and maybe someone can bring it around. So maybe while that's happening. So on the topic of sort of high-level advisory and so forth, I'd be curious, when you see firms expanding into like ancillary services, what are the, like I know we talk a lot about kind of CAS and we talk about the financial transactions. What's the next ring outside of that in your mind?
Well, in order to answer the question, I have to provide the starting point. The starting point is about a 90-10. We consult with a lot of the top 100 CAS practices, and we've done research into those we don't consult with. We consult all the way down to the individual bookkeeper. And what we're finding is in the world of CAS, CPA practices, not so much the bookkeepers that go to Scaling New Heights. They're more bleeding edge and they're more nimble. But in the CAS practices, David, we're seeing about a 90-10 split. I thought it would be 80-20. I thought Pareto would rule, but this is more 90-10, where 10% are true advisory and 90% are bookkeeping glorified.
Yep.
So when you're talking about untapped potential, you're talking about this less than 1 percentile of each market. Anybody that can crack this particular nut, which is why I want to make sure I brought it up, because you're poised to crack the nut, is going to address this unaddressed 90% of the CAS market. And the reason they're not getting there is because they're taking too big of a leap. They're thinking that I have to go from recording a bank rec all the way up to fractional CFO, business coaching. You stand to bridge that gap. This is what was going in my mind the whole time. None of this was rehearsed. I didn't hear any of this until a minute ago, so I'm drinking my fire hose and processing fast. But you stand positioned, David, to bridge the gap between this financial outsourcing of CFO and all this complex advisory and this record keeping, which is this middle ground that very few people are servicing, which is why you have this 90% of unserviced market. Whether you call it outsourced controllership or, if I'm talking to a non-credential accountant, I call it bookkeeping plus. Or if I'm talking to sometimes I'll say light advisory or something like that, but it's this unserved middle ground. And in that unserved middle ground, the forefront, the most marketable and sellable service is the spend management. We give a lot of, the terminology is used heavily, but nobody actually builds practices around it holistically. G&A analysis, accounts receivable has its own spend management, which is bad debt, right? It could be cost controls. But see, you're sitting at every piece of that. You know, maybe not the bad debt expense as much, but you're sitting at every piece of the cash outlay. And including, you might be bloated on your workforce. You might need to reduce headcount. You can see that. But you got to surface it up. Accountants are way too busy. They have to have it all encapsulated and placed into a conversation map from the end of the month. And then they can turn, for CPA practices, a $1,200 CAS practice into a $2,500, $3,000 a month, you know, spend management client where we happen to do the books, right?
Got it.
And you're so close with everything you built.
So close.
To giving us that.
Yeah, I think the feature where we recommend firing employees is not on the roadmap right now, but you know. Okay,
hey,
so
it's our job to tell our clients that, right? Exactly.
Great. So if there's anyone who has any questions about literally anything at all, now is a great time to ask them. As an aside, I hope you all scanned that QR code that was up there earlier, and we're going to be in this chat room. And actually, I'd love for you to hang out in the chat room as well, that we can answer questions forever. And so, but now we can do it for a couple of minutes right now. So does anyone have any questions? We got some microphones. Oh, back here.
Hi, I'm Jin Young from New York. I work with BDO. I've been a really big fan of ExpensiCon. I love hearing all the visions of you. So recently, I've been working with many clients, especially on the ExpensiCon cards. And then since we started introducing ExpensiCon cards, what I was asked a lot about is the budgetary tracking. If we could, since clients start using ExpensiCon cards, if we could have also, based on the ExpensiCon card usage, if there could be budgetary tracking, then that would be even better. So I was wondering if that is something that you're envisioning.
Yeah, we hear budgets all the time. I think that that's not an area that we've really perfected yet. We're not even tried. And so I would love to have more conversations about that. If you could drop into the chat room, basically, what your vision is for budgets, because I think that I think we've lacked kind of a collective imagination for what that is. Everyone's like, we should do budgeting. And then you dig in another level and it just explodes into a million different directions. And so we've tried to simplify budgeting down to something that can be implemented and repeated. And I don't think we've really figured out what that is. But if you have a vision for that, I'd love to hear that. And so let's drop it in the chat room, and then I'd love everyone's thoughts on that.
I've got a question over here.
Hey, David. Peter from South Africa. I like data and I like insights. So if you've got so much data on so many different expenses and payments, what are your thoughts around maybe taking that and surfacing some of those insights and saying, hey, you're spending much more on advertising than the average company of your size, or hey, I can see you spending in these areas, you could maybe curb your spending there.
Yeah,
gets right back to the spend management.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely true. And I think the step one is getting all the data in the same place. And so I think that our focus has been, because I think we saw that opportunity with sort of our classic design, but that's actually a hard platform to express sort of this data in a useful fashion. I think that the way to get that insight into your hands is through sort of more of a conversational interface, because oftentimes we find people love data. Everyone says I love data. And what specifically do you like about data? I just love it all. And it's okay, that doesn't help. And so we find it's not just about, everyone thinks I want a specific report that will tell me the great thing, and that's true, but there's an infinite number of reports that could be made. And so the hard part is figuring out how to ask the right question, and a well-structured question is easy to answer. And so step one is get the data in the right place. Step two is create kind of a conversational experience. And then I think that we would love to enable concierge to answer your questions in a more conversational way around data. Often, because we've looked at, there's a bunch of different data tools. Actually, be curious for your thoughts on this. There's a bunch of different data analysis tools out there, and we've explored a bunch of them. And it doesn't seem like any of them is getting a ton of traction or is a serious market leader. And I would think it's because it's so hard to articulate the question you want to answer. Once you have it, then actually it's pretty easy to do, but it doesn't help you with the hardest part, which is figuring out what question to ask.
Well, yes, so it's the answer, not the question, but it's also a capacity issue, David. Like I said earlier, unless all of this data is pre-mined for the accounting professional, surfaced up in a conversation map and handed to them on a silver platter, they simply won't have the conversation. The tools are great, but nobody has time to get back to War and Peace.
Yeah.
They have to write the entire dashboard. They have to constantly curate the dashboard. And then they have to explain all of the dashboard widgets to a client who doesn't understand them and barely cares. What the client wants to know is, back to what you said, am I overspending in advertising as compared to my competitors? And if that is, and we have about 30 seconds to prepare for that conversation every single month. So we need about a 30-second scan. These are the 10 talking points with the client. Here are the questions. Here are the answers. Go, make the phone call. And until that happens, advisory won't happen.
Got it. And so maybe kind of the theme you're going to hear again and again. I would love to keep talking with you more and engage everyone here. If you can go to that chat room, ask that question and say, here are the kind of the 5, what I think the 5 most important questions to answer are, or maybe the 5 most important reports to do, or something like that. Because if you can tell us exactly what you want, then we can build it. But I would say, so far, we haven't really crystallized down what that would even look like, and so I can't ask an engineer to build it quite yet. Yeah. But let's figure that out together.
Guys, let's give David the questions. Everybody in this room collectively knows the questions.
Let's hear them.
And he already said it. He's on the hook. A well-formed question's easy to answer. So go, David, just answer the question. Yeah.
Put us at the test. Any questions?
Got a question here.
Hi guys. Josh from Canada. Joe, you mentioned that ExpensiCon is changing the name to Accountify, so I'm really looking forward to being invited to Accounticon next year. But on that note, so just maybe sort of directionally, like, so ExpensiCon, expense management, is the idea that now that this is practice management, like, is that the new direction of ExpensiCon, and then competing with Carbon and all sort of that, those sort of set of tools?
It's a good question. I would say, I think practice management, like a lot of other platforms, is not it's not an island. It doesn't need to be carved out into its own thing. It just has historically been. I think that we're going to do elements of practice management. That's true. I don't think that we're going to go as far as like CCH or something like this. But I think that we can carve off a lot of sort of the low end elements and bring them out to a wider audience. I think there's always going to be specialized tools for a lot of different things. And maybe as an aside, no part of this will suggest that we'll stop integrating with the rest of the ecosystem. Because I think that we want to provide an incredibly wide, solid base for everything, but we're not going to be the best for anything. We're not going to be the best for, maybe for expense management, but I would say like if you want like more advanced, bill processing where you're going to do like sort of financing of the receivables and things like this.
Approval layers. And
things like, we'll do approval, but like probably that's more advanced stuff than that. And so anyway, I would say, just like there's more advanced practice management use cases we're not going to get into, there's more advanced payroll cases and all that sort of stuff. We can provide a good baseline for pretty much most companies out there, and then you can swap out whatever you don't like to be with a better tool. That's fine. So we think that there's going to be a rich ecosystem of specialist players out there. We want to collaborate with all of them, but we want to have a good showing for everything across the board as well. And I think that's true for practice management as well as for everything else.
And just to kind of give you a practical answer for this, we have a best-in-class conference management app. It's WebEx, which Cvent and WebEx are considered to be the best of the breed. And it, of course, has a chat bot. So David approached me and he goes, I'd like to use my chat bot for your chat bot instead of the chat bot you have. And this was the actual conversation, David, I didn't tell you that we had, but I went to the team and I was like, ExpensiCon's our actual largest sponsor. And David is one of my longest term friends, but I'm not putting my baby in just any, basket. So we had to look at it, for its own merits. And after my team examined it, it blows WebEx away. So when you're great at something, the contextualization and conversation around an expense, great always beats good. And I would love to see this great infused into CCH like your great was infused into my WebEx.
Well, yeah, and I think that we can do that by, again, we don't need to replace these tools. Like, so for example, we're hosting ExpensiCon on ExpensiCon. So like this chat-enabled conference experience, which is very unique. And so we're talking basically about how do we, hopefully with Scaling New Heights, basically, how can we try to bring more chat experiences into the typical conference experience? We're making all this shit up as we go. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have the benefit of, we built a chat solution not because we set out to build chat. We built a chat solution because we set out to dominate expense management. And this is just the best way to do it. And once you have it, however, then you can use it in a wide variety of additional contexts. It's not like we set out to build a great conference management tool, but it just happens to be a great management tool. And it's not going to replace, a bunch of other stuff that these conference management tools do, like meeting management and things like this, but we can integrate with them as well. And so I think that we want to fill in the cracks between all these tools. We want to provide a really great baseline offering for all these tools, but we're certainly not going to replace all these tools, not entirely.
Yeah, love that. Well, everything in life is ultimately a conversation. So if you can be the conversation of everything else, it's perfect.
That's exactly right.
We've got one over here.
So I really love the client collaboration part. I hate email personally, so I'd love one place where we could do all of that. And then I also really love the task assignment and tracking there to assign it to the client, et cetera. A lot of times we exclude the clients from all of that. One thing that I think happens the most, and there's a lot of chatter in these types of rooms, is a lot of knowledge is being transferred. Mm-hmm. How do we capture that knowledge in like a wiki page that, hey, here's how you do this next time, so that we can avoid the 300 other times we're going to do it in the next 2 months?
Great question. And so a feature that we don't have yet is basic, very basic, sort of like documentation capture inside the tool itself. Now imagine, if you will, a chat room that just has one giant comment that's just a document. Boom. Now we're like a word processor. Now we're basically like a simple wiki style sort of experience. And so I think that we want to give you tools to augment, especially the tasks, with that kind of documentation in tool. And so it's not going to replace Google Docs or anything like that. But if you want to capture basic workflow documentation in the tool itself, we want to have it in that context. Absolutely. I think so. One is kind of implicit knowledge transfer through capturing best practices in a sort of documented form. I think as you bring all this data mining of the conversations themselves, then you can kind of do implicit knowledge transfer as well, where you can have something like ChatGPT or some of its variants. It's like, this is what people said. This is what people said months ago. And so you can like surface old conversations in a new context. So you don't have to go and say like, okay, last quarter you had like 6,000 conversations. Like go read through all of them for this quarter. Like that's not going to happen. But if you can have it, the tools basically say, here are the key themes that happened last time. And especially if you can train the AIs to be like, here's where things go wrong, and teach people to say like, hey, say next time, let's do this. And then have the AIs figure out, well, here's the stuff that you said you wanted to do next time, better, and so forth. We're still figuring all this stuff out, but I agree, if you could bring all these conversations to a common platform, then you can get a combination of the explicit documentation in tool and all this, I think, the very exciting implicit components that you can have just by mining it all out back.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is manifested in meeting software, that scrapes Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams calls and things like that. Avoma is a good example of it. Chorus.ai is another good example of it. And it will, but what it lacks is it doesn't capture, it will capture like the Zoom chat, but in an environment like this, what I would love to have had is everybody taking notes, like we're in a big Zoom call, and just like Avoma will scrape the Zoom, this is what you were getting at, just like it would scrape the Zoom chat from if everybody here was in one Zoom call, and it would pull it into pain points, questions, and analyze it and break it down. Imagine that, conversation, aggregation, and summarization.
Yeah.
Because if every check is a conversation, then every bookkeeping cycle is a conversation, just a longer one.
Yep.
And every client portfolio across a year is just a larger conversation to be mined. I think that's absolutely brilliant, if I didn't read too much into what you said. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions. Sorry. If you have any more, denied. No, but if you do have any more, this is exactly why the chat room is here. So drop them in there. We are around to talk them through, but also gives us a record. But I did want to just take a moment to say thank you to Joe and David. So put your hands together.
Thanks so much. This is wonderful.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.